Occult Confessions is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate to help keep the history of the occult on the digital airwaves. Welcome to a special episode that isn't going to seem exactly like a special episode, because the topic is a familiar one, and so is my very special guest. My name is Rob C. Thompson. I am the Supreme Hierophant of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, and my guest today is our very own Grand Master, Olivia Littoral.
Hello. It's me, the guest of honor.
So Olivia and I talked about this, and we decided that the best way to approach this was an interview format. Now, back in 2018, Olivia was a big fan of the reptilians' conspiracy theory, so much so that she did an entire flipped episode on the subject. And back then, I said, Olivia, we should come back and do one that focuses on David Icke, and she said, sure. And here we are. And a lot has happened since then. Am I right, Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, we redid the reptilian episode.
To begin,
yeah. So.
That's true. And a lot has changed in the world. Conspiracy culture has changed substantially with the rise of Q and Pizzagate and all these things. Pizzagate was actually 2017, 2016, but Q definitely came about and became popular in the time since we've started this. And the way conspiracy culture has trended and the influence it's had on the culture has, I'm going to say, grown and not necessarily for... Okay, necessarily, and not for the best. So our attitudes toward conspiracy culture have shifted a bit. It's also the case that on this very show, we have, and this is not intentional, but we have covered more or less the entire backstory of David Icke's reptilians conspiracy theory. When we covered Zecharia Sitchin, the Babylonian gods, and the Sitchin argued that the Babylonian gods were actually extraterrestrials, and that the story of the birth of the, or the various mythologies of Babylon were in fact telling how the planet Earth formed and how extraterrestrials landed and interacted with humankind. We talked about Cathy O'Brien and Cathy O'Brien's Project Monarch conspiracy theory. She believed she was a sex slave for the CIA, and she told a story about George H.W. Bush, who met with her at one point, or rather liked to meet with people generally, and have a hologram of a reptile projected on top of his face. We talked about Milton William Cooper, whose Behold a Pale Horse includes references to the Brotherhood of the Snake or the Brotherhood of the Dragon. This was a sort of prototype for David Icke's reptilians. And most recently, we talked about Robert E. Howard, who was the creator of Conan the Barbarian, and he created tales of snake priests attacking his main character. And those snake priests were interpolated from William Scott Elliott's book about Atlantis, which was itself interpolated from Helena Blavatsky's theories. But Helena Blavatsky, of course, as we've said many times, did not believe that there were actual literal reptilians or snake people. She used the term serpent to refer to people of knowledge, spiritual beings who were guiding humankind. So yeah, at this point we've covered everything that informs the David Icke reptilian theory, but I didn't necessarily intend to do that when we were working on the episodes. It just sort of happened that way. And looking back now, I realize, just as I was preparing for this episode, I realized that we've done it all. We've covered everything David Icke drew on.
Well, he is in part a collection of just other people. So
I think you cited the statistic, Olivia, when we did the Archon episode, but in 2013, there was a public policy poll that was done that found that 4% of Americans believe in reptilians or lizard people. I mean, right now, 2021, 15% of Americans believe there's a satanic cabal controlling the government, corporations, and the media. So it's just, back when you gave us that statistic, I was shocked. But now today, when we compare it to the satanic cabal theory, it's just such a different world we're in. So anyway, this is the long way of saying Olivia has evolved on this topic of reptilians, and Olivia's feelings about reptilians have changed. So today, I'm going to play the interviewer, and Olivia is going to play my guest, and we're going to figure out how Olivia, why she loved reptilians and why she doesn't anymore. Let's pledge it out. we the members of the secret order of alchemical actors do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it. Moth almost flew into my mouth while I was doing that.
I was wondering what you...
Yeah, it just suddenly appeared.
That's some occult shit.
I'm telling you, Ike is after us today. All right, so here's what I want to do. Let's plug it in, Olivia, first. Go ahead.
Ooh, plug.
Yeah, we actually do have some patrons to talk about, which is delightful. You know, we got behind a bit. We have Chris and Eli N, Frank L.H., Suzanne, Michael, Devin H., and Left Hand Templar.
Oh, that's cryptic, but I love it.
All we need is Right Hand Templar and No Hand Templar, and we have the full set.
We are complete.
I want to thank Justified and Ancient in Canada, who says that we had them at the debunking of the protocols, and we've got to be aware of the satanic panic mob. Thank you, Justified. I hear you.
Thank you.
I hear you. Herb Harlot asks if we could have an acupuncture, or why we didn't have an acupuncturist on in our Chinese medicine episode. And I do have an answer for that. It's because back then we did not do interviews at all because I didn't like the sound quality. But since then, we've managed to find the right programs and we can generally get good sound quality. We also don't tend to mix formats, so we will either do a research episode or an interview episode. But we would love to have an acupuncturist on, I think, Olivia, don't you?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, so Herb, if you are one or if you know one, let us know.
Hook us up.
Couple of plugs for some friends in the community. There's a new podcast out there, the Historia podcast, who on their Insta feed or their social media today posted that today in history, which is not the day you're listening to this episode, dear confessors, but today in history, the Globe Theater burnt down, Shakespeare's Globe. So the Historia podcast, Stephanie's the host, talks about the history of the world. I think just like all of it.
Wow, that's a lot.
Big project.
A lot to cover.
Also, Alexis Braud, B-R-A-U-D, is working on the Carnival of Creatures. So Alexis is a writer with the Louisiana bookshop Tubby and Coos, T-U-B-B-Y and C-O-O-S, Tubby and Coos, Carnival of Creatures creative writing project. So it looks like a lot of fun. It's got like this sort of Louisiana vibe, but very monstery and neat.
Spooky.
All right. By all means, join our patrons, buy a t-shirt, review us. Close up those plugs.
Plug.
All right, so here's what I wanted to do. Olivia and I have talked about this at length because this is, again, a very unusual way of approaching an episode. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk us through the hallmarks of the David Icke theory, and Olivia is going to comment, and then once we've sort of laid that out, then we're going to go into why Olivia loved the reptilians theory, and we're going to figure out why Olivia's evolved on this topic. I'm using the word evolved, so I'm projecting onto.
Makes me sound so like enlightened. Yes. I have evolved past Ike.
Like you went on an Oprah episode and you were changed. Yeah.
Did some ayahuasca. And now I'm back.
Yes. Yeah. Well, kind of, right? You did that. You did that episode. You did the DMT episode.
Then I did shrooms after. So
you spent time experimenting with Terrence McKenna. You researched McKenna, and he cleansed you of David Icke.
He did. I think when McKenna convinced me. All right, Olivia, do shrooms, and then I did shrooms, and then I guess reptilians just fucking left.
Now we know how to cure them.
Wow. Huh.
It was that easy all along. All right, let's do this. So again, I'll just do these point by point, and Olivia, any thoughts you have after I give the point, just have at it.
Okay, here we go.
Point number 1. What are reptilians? Reptilians are shape-shifting lizard people who occupy positions of power in government and media. I'll say if you heard our Robert Howard episode, I think it's pretty much like that. They literally can wear other faces. The reptilians include many of the Windsors, the House of Windsor, particularly Queen Elizabeth II, George W. Bush, the Clintons, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, of course, Bob Hope, Madonna, Katy Perry, Angelina Jolie. Bob Hope is interesting to me because there was a Project Monarch book about Bob Hope. Somebody claimed to have been his sex slave. So the Project Monarch stuff often overlaps. And if you haven't heard my Kathy O'Brien episode, check that out. All right, Olivia, any thoughts on this? These are the lizard people.
Well, I did have one thing. So, fun fact, I found out that Ike actually has a friendship with Kathy O'Brien. Like,
Oh, I believe
they're
it.
buds.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I didn't realize, because so, preface, I have an 800, like, page book that's, like, a collective that Ike says this is everything you need to know, and I was, like, looking in the back, like, there's a index, and I was looking for something else, and I was like, "Holy shit, Kathy O'Brien," and he has a whole bit talking about, well, Project Monarch in part, but talking about his friendship with Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, so Kathy, if David Icke is your complex relationship, Kathy O'Brien is my complex relationship
Yeah.
with a conspiracy theorist.
I also, I don't know if I ever really understood this or made this clear, but apparently there are also like people that are like reptilian shapeshifters that don't know that they are. It, like, so apparently, like, he was talking about, like, there's this one person with, I don't know, it had to do with Project Monarch, I guess, but basically say, oh shit, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I
I
mean,
knew.
I did read this a little bit that you could be born one, right? Because they're hybrids often
Oh
of
no,
humans
it's
and reptilians.
so, you know how we did the whole, like, they have Kathy O'Brien and those like her have like the alters, and it's like the DID,
Yes,
and
multiple personalities.
so
Yeah.
there are people that claim that there are some of these people, like Bill Clinton was one of the examples. I just remember that one. I don't know why, but that he actually like doesn't know that he is a shape-shifting reptilian.
Because he's dissociated.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
So it's
complicated.
like, apparently, so like there's like another level of which I just feel like I need to point out that, like, there's, I don't know. Ike is just like an endless, like, what would the word be?
Well, it's a super conspiracy. It subsumes everything, right?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, there's always, I don't want to say he contradicts himself a bunch because I think he does, but I guess that's an opinion.
Part two, or number two, not part two. This is still part one.
Oh, here, see, this is going to be so hard. I got to keep my mouth shut more. Okay.
No, you're good. Point number two. Signs you might be a reptilian, in case, as Olivia is saying, you might not know.
Yeah.
But this would not help Bill Clinton. You have red hair or green eyes. I don't think Bill Clinton has those.
No,
You have
he is not a ginger.
You have unexplained scars. You have low blood pressure, or you have a strange love of space. That's my favorite.
Yeah, because that's that whole starseed, I think, aspect of, right? Where all these people that think they're starseeds, they think they're part alien hybrids. So they, like,
okay.
love space. They're, like, very attracted to space is, like, one of the big criterias.
So they might be reptilians.
I don't know if that, see, that's something I guess would be really interesting if I ever cover, like, Unicult, would be to get into
I really want you to.
like, what people that think they're a star seed, like, really think is the, like, identifying factors. But yeah,
Love of space.
yeah,
I kind of just like open space.
space scares me, so I don't think I'm
I like time space,
an alien.
like the dimension of space. All right, number three. Reptilians exist to suppress human potential. They are the Archons, the Babylonian Anunnaki, and the Enochian Watchers. So if you go back to our demonology episode, we get into that. They operate as the Babylonian Brotherhood or the Illuminati. Again, Ike likes to like swallow all the conspiracy theories out there under his. They are a crew of reptile Aryans. Now, that's kind of an important point, I think. Reptile Aryans. He specifically uses the term Aryans, and I believe Ike is intentionally connecting the reptilians to fascism, yes?
So the Nordics are an alien race that is, like, what I think, like, other people would connect to the Aryan race, because it's like the blonde hair, blue eyes. Like, it is that whole, like, it then goes into the whole, like, Nazi, Hitler stuff. But apparently the Nordics and the reptilians are, like, super enemies, like, really at war. And apparently, like, Earth is, like, been the battlefield for that war for a long time, is part of and then the Greys kind of get in there, in and out too.
So they're at war with the Aryans, but there's also hybrid versions of reptile Aryans?
So I guess so I don't know how often Ike really uses, at least when I was reading, he didn't use the word Aryan that much. He mostly uses the Nordics as, like, because the Nordics are so I guess the Aryans would more so be the people that were the hybrids of the Nordic people on Earth, I think. I could be wrong, but the Nordics are, like, the alien race that's, like, the blonde hair, blue eyes, that I think the Aryans then come
descend
from.
from in some way, and they mate
It's
with the
kind of weird
reptilians.
too, because in Ike's like hierarchy, it's like the demiurge is the head, then there's the archons, then there's the reptilians, so it's like not reptilians aren't at the top, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think we'll get there. You'll have to tell me. Okay, so
I hope I'm like clarifying things and not making things more confusing. But
right now they're getting a little more confusing, but I think as we go,
I think
we'll
that's Ike
clarify.
though. I think it's like
The more
he
you
sets
read
a
him.
couple of foundational things and then everything depends on those.
The reptilians created or control the UN, the IMF, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the media. I could go on. Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. These are like hallmarks of most Illuminati conspiracy theories.
For sure.
Okay, so nothing to add there.
No, that's good.
Their purpose is to invoke constant fear, and they feed off of our negative energy, sort of like Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're really described as like psychic vampires.
They have caused, to that end, the Oklahoma City bombing, the Dunblane School massacre, the Columbine School massacre, 9/11, the London bombings of 7/7, global warming. They've put fluoride in the water. They've killed Princess Diana, also JFK.
Honestly, Di was like the last straw. How dare you?
Right? So they've done a heck of a lot of bad things. And this is also JFK, 9/11. I mean, all these conspiracy theories are winding together into like super conspiracy. Reptilians manipulate the left hemisphere of your brain by broadcasting signals into the brain. Humans have to force themselves to think for themselves, as opposed to thinking with what Icke calls their moon mind. Now, the reason he calls that your moon mind is because the signals that they are broadcasting into your brains are being broadcast from the moon.
Yep.
Now,
it's a hologram.
So tell me more about this. The moon itself is a hologram?
God. So I'm not, okay, here's another preface. I am not like a space person. I'm not a science person. I struggle. I just try to keep up, okay?
Fair enough.
But see, I can't. What am I answering?
What is the moon? Is the moon not a hunk of rock orbiting the Earth that helps to keep the Earth on its axis?
So apparently, and Ike got this idea because he claims people like that went to the moon and that were on the moon said this and shit. But essentially, the moon is a constructed. I don't think the moon itself is a hologram. I think it helps to project the hologram. It goes back into Ike has this whole it's the whole simulated reality thing, but it also has to do with this very specific part of your brain that can see the electromagnetic spectrum and shit. It's see, I'm making this so much more confusing.
Okay, so the part of your brain that can see the electromagnetic spectrum, that would be outside of your moon mind. That would be your authentic mind, maybe.
So when you say moon mind, I think he calls it a phantom self. I think that's what you're talking.
What I mean by moon mind is it's the projected self from the aliens on the moon. They're pushing it into your brain. You have to think past your moon mind.
So it's okay. Okay. So that all relies on I don't know.
I'd like to know more. I find it all kind of the moon thing. I'd love to know more about. I agree that if we bring logic to it, we do need a hunk of rock to orbit the Earth, because if we don't, then the Earth gets off kilter and we can't have life on Earth.
But you're assuming that we're not in the Matrix, Rob.
So the Earth is a material entity in space. Okay, so that's open to...
nothing is material. That's the thing. Nothing is physical. Okay.
So everything is projections of the moon mind.
Literally, atoms are not solid, according to Icke. Okay,
well, that's kind of true. I mean, they're
yes, that is why he got the science.
Okay.
But then he goes to the extent of saying that therefore there's no way that atoms could link together to create a solid world. So what we experience as touch or the senses, our normal senses, hearing, tasting, all that shit. It's not actually a physical resistance, two things touching each other. It's actually just two electromagnetic fields interacting. So basically, because of that, so he has this whole thing where he says the ears don't hear, the brain does. So your brain is basically a computer hard drive, is what he says. Well, no, I'm sorry. DNA is a computer hard drive. So your brain essentially has to process like electric like communications before your ears can, is what he says. Because there's a small, tiny part of your brain that like we basically have like no access to, essentially, that lets us see electromagnetic fields, is like, or the electromagnetic spectrum, I guess is what it would be. Am I making sense? Am I starting to make sense?
Yes. Now, when we see that, are we seeing an illusion?
So, yes. So basically, then everything around us is illusionary. That then like feeds into this idea, which I then am gonna say is like one of my big qualms about Icke, is this idea of we shouldn't have an identity, like we shouldn't have a self-identity. Essentially, is what he means by this phantom self, is like all the things that our name, our gender, our age, like our sexuality, like all these things that we like attribute to being us are bad. We shouldn't have them because they're all physical and they don't matter.
It's a little bit Hindu, Buddhist in a way.
It's a little
transcending the ego.
Yeah, another thing I'll complain about later is that he kind of just takes, and then says, "Ah, yes, all of this affirmed everything I already believed in." Like, it's the most narcissistic. Anyway, so then the moon. I guess what I'm trying to, is that helping explain the moon?
Yeah, we're getting closer
a little bit better.
Yeah.
So then the moon, as far as I remember, it essentially helps to then, I guess, project this illusion, to project this whatever. Which I guess then, even as I'm saying that, I am like asking myself 50 questions in my head. So,
well, let me do something goofy, and then I'll do one more thing that maybe will help you complete this picture. So real quick. On advice channeled to him through automatic writing, David Icke wore a turquoise shell suit to channel positive energy, to counter the negative energy of the reptilians.
He wore that shit for years, I think. Like all turquoise, right? Like,
it was called his turquoise period, as if he was like Picasso or something.
Well, he literally, and it makes sense too, because he says that, so each of our all of our cells, basically, the like membranes of each one of our cells is a liquid crystal. So he then says that is actually like acts as like a receiver when it comes to like our DNA, because he describes our DNA as basically being a computer hard drive, which I mean, I'll probably get into that later when I talk about big pharma. So I don't need to get into
Fair
that,
enough.
But.
So let's see if this helps connect at least some of it. Maybe it'll make it worse. I don't know. The reptilians, this is my last thing, and then we can get into the good and the bad and the ugly. The reptilians come from the constellation Draco, which is the dragon. The Draco is the dragon in the night sky. Like, Gemini are the twins, and Pisces are the two fish, and Sagittarius is the horse guy with the arrow. So they come from Draco, and they have been coming to Earth since ancient times, breeding with humans and making more lizard people, but they are from the fourth dimension. They are not from our dimension. This is the closest dimension to our own in an unfolding procession of alternate universes. We are controlled in our dimension by the reptilians in the fourth dimension. The reptilians themselves are controlled from the fifth dimension by somebody else, and on and on and on.
Yeah. That's exactly like what I was talking about earlier with the hierarchy, I guess.
Oh yeah, getting back to the Greys and all that. So they're all on different dimensions controlling each other?
Or even just the demiurge is the top, and then it's the archons, and then the reptilians, and I guess the Nordics, and then the Greys are the same level as the reptilians. And then I think it's like the bottom is like us being slave meat or something on the chart. It's like a ridiculous picture in the book.
We're under the Nordics.
Oh, we are below the person's feet in the chart. We are literally meat is like our label. I think the only people above us are people like in the royal family, the UN, like the people that they think are like controlling the government are actually technically under the reptilians.
Okay, so getting back to those people, they're not the reptilians of the fourth dimension. They are some sort of reptilian human hybrid.
Right. Like some sometimes he would suggest, like I was talking about, like at one point he was talking to someone that suggested that Bill Clinton was a reptilian shapeshifter, but doesn't know because he's like under mind control because he is part human. So like, I guess they don't give you all the freedom, even if you're Bill Clinton. I don't know.
All right, so before we get to good, bad, and ugly, are there any other things you want us to know before we go good, bad, and ugly? Like, just set us up. I feel like we've got a basic idea.
I feel like I should touch back maybe on the DNA because
So it's a hard drive.
So we are basically biological computers.
Okay.
And specifically, like our DNA is like a computer hard drive that Icke says that because we are all a part of this simulation, essentially, the Matrix he literally freely uses the Matrix, like constantly. He quotes Neo. It's a whole thing. But he basically says that you can learn to hack the system, extend your lifespan or cure cancer. Like, we should be able to very easily do this if we are like in tune with the infinite awareness. But he calls big pharma the pharmacological death cult.
Fair enough.
And he literally says, like, the elites are keeping the info about DNA being so like hackable away from the public so that big pharma can, have its wicked way, is I think what he literally said. But
well, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, I don't know if you've continued to follow him, but part of the reason he's fallen out of favor is because big pharma, while they are often evil and do evil things, they're big corporations. Most recently, they've been kind of heroes on account of they've rescued us all from the pandemic. But Icke has not gone along with the narrative that this mRNA vaccine is a miracle of modern science.
He's been like pretty much deplatformed, at least I know, on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, they're quite aggressive with the conspiracy stuff now.
Oh, well, and he fucking hates, like, what's his face? Facebook dude, Zuckerberg.
He believes he's a reptilian, right?
Oh, 100%. But, then there's like, okay, well, anyone that hurts you or anyone that makes you shut up, like, are they a reptilian too? Which, anyway.
So his argument is that the vaccine is what?
Well, I don't know. So I don't know exactly what he. Well, so I can assume his issue with the vaccine being the whole microchip angle, because Icke thinks that essentially the reptilian goal is, and I'll talk about one of the big steps, which is called the transgender agenda. That's going to be fun.
Okay.
But it's so he basically thinks that the reptilians are going to make humankind essentially like slowly become like unable to procreate on their own without technology, and they're basically cyborgs for all intents and purposes. Like, they will become like farther and farther away from being human and more like synthetic, I guess is the word. And then eventually we all get microchipped, and then we're all part of the AI system. So once we're all plugged into the AI system, we're all fucked, essentially.
So I'm not going to try to force logic on this too much, but we are computers, but Big Pharma is trying to make us computers.
Wait, hold on. Let me think about that.
So our DNA is a hard drive.
Big Pharma is just giving us shit that doesn't do anything.
Oh, so they're lying.
Yes. So it's literally just Big Pharma is something that the elites, so anyone, he says the elites, so that's anyone that's in power that, is sus, basically. Anyone he thinks is a reptilian or hybrid or, all that shit. So he says that the elites, this is just another thing that they do, is they keep like the info of, like, medical things could be so much easier because we're just computers that you can hack into. We're going to keep that away from the public, because if they knew that, then we wouldn't need Big Pharma anymore. And Big Pharma is such a big industry. And I think it, yeah.
So in part, the answer to COVID is, for him, it's all an illusion. He's like a Christian Scientist in that way. He thinks that disease can be prayed away, in a sense.
Well, I don't even know exactly I don't know if he thinks the disease is real or not. I'm going to assume that he thinks it's a reptilian strategy, and that the vaccines, I'm assuming, because everyone, that's the big conspiracy with the vaccines, right? It's the microchipping. That's like what people are like really like losing their shit about. And so I am assuming because microchipping is such a like in his eyes, like that's the end goal. Like I'm assuming he's in the stance of, oh, this is a reptilian tactic.
And to clarify, we of course do not hold this to be true at all. There are no
Oh
microchips
God,
inside of your vaccines. Please get a
no! I
vaccine.
just got my second one. I'm tired as shit, but I'm okay,
You're
guys.
gonna be
Like,
fine. You can.
and if the government already would have microchipped us, guys, if they wanted to at birth. Like, anyway, I'm sorry. Let's. Anyway.
They could
It's not
microchip
like
you at any moment. They don't need a vaccine to do it.
it's not like when I got my tetanus shot, they didn't have the opportunity. Is all I'm saying.
Right, yeah. Or all of our shots when we're little.
That's right. So
Not that a microchip could really go in a vaccine anyhow, in my opinion, or survive in the body, but anyhow.
no,
We don't have the
yeah.
technology. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly then. So why did you like the reptilian theory?
Okay. So I think this is where I should say that in my head, I can still separate reptilian conspiracy theory from Icke's reptilian conspiracy theory. Because I still think that there is like, there are differences that are like able to be there where it doesn't have to be so detrimental in certain ways. Or problematic in certain ways, because like at its core, to me, I think the the part about the reptilian conspiracy theory that's like so interesting, or really, any conspiracy theory that has to do with the government, is because it is in a way a reflection or a projection of how the masses tend to feel about the government, or like insecurities with the government, feeling like the government isn't listening or is holding out information. Like I think that's a big thing with any alien conspiracy theory in general. So to me, that's like the part that I think is appealing and that I think is, interesting slash entertaining slash take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's still like, it's an allegory, kind of,
So it's when I said I found Kathy O'Brien's story to be compelling as an allegory, that's essentially
Yeah,
what you're saying, because it's getting you to
exactly.
think for yourself and question the powers that be, and the things she had to say about politicians being violent and the media being
Yeah.
indoctrinating us. I mean, these are true aspects of what it's like to be human.
Because, like, don't get me wrong, like, I see big pharma as also dangerous. I'm someone that is daily medicated, and I still can recognize it being a huge problem, like, especially, in America.
Well,
Like,
yeah, the opioid crisis was definitely encouraged by Purdue Pharma, for sure.
right. Like, there is so many, war on drugs. Like, we get into a whole thing on that and how it was this whole, half planted thing. Like, there are, like, definitely, like, real issues that aren't conspiracy.
So
So,
reptilian to you is kind of a fun way of getting into this critique of power.
yeah. Yeah, and also I also think the connection to like how people connect it to Gnosticism to me is just really interesting as someone that, you know, you and I just like reading that kind of shit. Like we think that's really interesting even from a historical perspective. So I in that way I also think it's interesting in how like a lot of religions that there's this course of like over history people adding to the theory and oh, this thing from history, let's add it to that. Like I think that's interesting because it's like lore building. It's like like building a world kind of in a way, but when it gets too serious, that's when it's a problem. And I think that's more of what we're seeing in like 2021.
Yeah, I mean, as you describe it to me, and I went through this very simple list of things, but when you talk about it, it starts to feel a little bit like secret doctrine or something. Where there are these complexities, and the tiny details can be unpacked into all these. This follows that. It's compelling in that way. It's a good story.
It is. It's also entirely maddening, I will say. Like, like there were points where you get so frustrated reading some of this that you have to like sit and remember it's just a white man with a privileged platform.
He was a sportscaster, right? David Icke, before he
He
was
was,
a soccer
and
player,
he
football player.
um one of my biggest problems with him is that he likes to play the victim. To be totally honest, he like all through his book, it's just nobody believed me, everyone hated me, blah blah blah. Everyone thought I was crazy, and it's like, yeah, what did you think was going to happen when you write an 800-page book about everything we need to know about the world? Like,
he intentionally put himself in that position, you mean?
Yeah, kind of, yes. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. He really, like, I think maybe, like, unless you really read his writing, you don't really, like, totally get this sense. But I think even when you watch interviews, you kind of a little bit. But he's just, to me, it's the narcissism for me. It's the narcissism.
So that he stirred this up and now he wants to, play the victim as opposed to stirring this up and saying, I know you people think I'm crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but I believe this anyway.
You can't think that you're some enlightened, like, way past everyone else, like, on this world kind of figure, and then also play the victim. Like Jesus didn't play the victim. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to bring it there, but like, because he I don't want to say he bashes religion. He doesn't bash it. He just...
It's another tool of the reptilians, I'm guessing.
It is. Well, so he uses the whole Gnostic demiurge thing, and he basically uses it to say that, like, oh, all these religions that think they're praising God right now aren't praising God. They're actually praising the demiurge, or this, like, dark negative force. So in that way, and then, like, he has a whole thing about the Old Testament being hacked, and, like, in that, like, do you get what I mean when it's like that kind of thing? It's like borderline. Okay, it's one thing you're going to take from things, but now you're...
It feels
it makes
condescending.
Me feel icky. It makes me feel icky. I don't know how to put it. It's very...
So he's both stealing from these traditions and mocking them. Is that what you mean?
I don't want to say he's mocking them. Well, sometimes I think he is a little bit. Maybe not mocking. Mocking's not the right word. It's just there's a lot of entitlement, I feel like, that comes with him writing. Like, okay, he literally does so much assuming about Gnosticism and, like, the Cathars, like, that no history professor I've ever had would do. You know, like, how, like, in history, everyone's like, oh, the Cathars, like, because of, how documents are, we don't really know a whole lot, and...
Well, the Cathars are meant to be an inheritor of the Gnostic tradition in many ways. And, I know we have an entire episode on that, but, the basic idea is that creation, from an Icke standpoint, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say from an Icke standpoint, that creation, what we understand as the created world, has actually been created by, you're saying demiurge, but, we could say like a demonic figure, a Lucifer, and that that character, that figure is separate from God. God is higher, God is spirit. Lucifer is matter, and there is a creator, evil creator of the world. And we have to get past that evil creator who's created, stuff, all the things we know, in order to connect with the higher God, which is a God of pure spirit.
So I think Icke, he doesn't straight up say this, I don't think, but I think he is kind of arguing that there is no benevolent God. There is no, like, what we think of, like we were saying, like, so, like I said, like, the demiurge is at the top of the chain. So from Gnosticism, he really latches on to, like, the demiurge. He latches on to a lot of things, like the whole, like...
So there's no real Gnosticism. There's
not
no
materialistic.
There's no ascension. There's no knowledge. There's no transcending.
No. Well, so there's not even in hell. Like, Icke thinks we're in hell right now. Like, this level, I think this goes back to, like, the dimensions. He also calls them levels, I think.
Of the alternate universes.
I think, yes. I think that's the same thing.
But we're all sort of eating each other as you climb. So to climb out of this level would just be to eat the level below you, right?
I really don't know.
We'll control them anyway. We're all controlling each other in a chain. We're at the bottom of the chain.
So he literally he traces the demiurge. Like, he says, like, so he has this whole thing with, like, light and, like, the bringer of light, much like Satan. And this idea of light being the sign of, like, the demiurge, which he does take from Gnosticism, but he kind of twists it. You can go to our episodes on that. But he basically says that, when, God created light at, 7 days, God created light. So that was actually just the demiurge creating the original, like, simulated matrix. So like, Icke says that the Old Testament was literally fucking hacked, and they basically, that's why, like, he says, like, in the Old Testament, God is, they try to pass him off as, like, a benevolent God, but he's a lot more harsh than he is in, like, the New Testament. So he says, like, it was an attempt to cover that up,
So when you
essentially.
say it was hacked, you mean the reptilians got involved in the rewriting or editing of the Old Testament to paint this portrait?
I then we get into a whole thing where I think he kind of has a thing against, like, see, this is where it gets weird, because he takes history, like, of, like, the Roman church, and then he, like, mixes it with other shit, and I can only tell even sometimes that it's, like, slightly off, just, like, slightly, and that's really just because of being in school and, like, taking history classes. So
it's all very close to history, but with a slight twist. Because the
sort of,
Bible,
yes.
the Old Testament, I guess, would be, God does rage and send angels of death and what have you, and plagues. That all would be accurate of a evil demiurge. However,
Right, I guess he's saying it was even more, it was edited. So that's the
okay,
edited
that's
version,
the edited
I
that
think
we
is what
have.
he's saying, like, which is why there is that difference between the New Testament and the Old Testament in the tone of God, I guess, is what he's saying.
I mean, it's not totally unique in that. A lot of UFO religions do this. They rewrite the Old Testament.
But
The Raelians, for example, say that, God, the original Adam and Eve and God, I mean, this is all actually extraterrestrial. So he's not the first or the last to get into this.
right, but then he basically uses that as a way to say, like, every religion is and is just an organization meant to enslave you. It just is another thing that adds to the phantom self, essentially.
Okay, fair enough.
So
I want to clarify here while we'll take just a quick moment. While we're saying that you like to interpret Icke as allegory, Icke himself believes everything he's saying is quite literal.
100% would die on that mountain. Yes.
I mean, the same problem I have with Kathy O'Brien. I don't think she would like my reading, although it's probably the most generous reading of her work that anyone's ever accomplished. Likely Icke would probably feel the same. And I think people have tried to read him as allegory. This gets me just quickly before we get into what's wrong with Icke, although you're really already doing that, but it gets me to the anti-Semitism, which I think is complicated, because part of the argument, as far as I understand it, on anti-Semitism is that the image of the reptilian is meant to stand in for the Jew, as the sort of distorted image. However, Icke doesn't mean for us to interpret the reptilian as an allegory for Jews. He means us to literally understand that there are reptilian people, and that many of them are not Jews. Bill Clinton, Katy Perry, on and on. Mm-hmm. So I find the anti-Semitism angle complicated. It's not nearly as obvious as I would say in like someone like Nesta Helen Webster, who literally invokes the protocols without apology.
No, for sure. And yes, if we're going to go to racism, let's go to racism.
Okay, so yeah. So where else can we head on this subject?
Well, because I do want to, I want to reiterate that I do not care. I do not care what Icke says. I do not care how many times he shouts it to the sky, writes it in a book, says it in an interview. He says that he is not anti-Semitic all he wants, but he is. Like, he inherently is. He, like... and you're right. Like, it's like on the surface at first, you like kind of have to search for it. But then, like, as you're reading, it's this like it really, it's like when it gets to like the whole Zionism thing and then the Rothschild family, he like latches into the Rothschild family, and like that is like really where I think like a shit ton of the like anti-Semitic like nature, like that's where a lot of it really lies.
So for everybody listening, the Rothschilds are Jewish banking family who have been hallmarks of the conspiracy scene, particularly the Illuminati conspiracy legend, for 100+ years. Well, maybe not 100 years, but close. Yeah, I might be right. I might be right that it's 100 years. It's 2021.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been 100 years that the Rothschilds have figured centrally in any scheme that's generally attributed to the Illuminati. And that goes back to Nesta Helen Webster, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, he links it to this whole, well, he has this whole thing where he says like the Rothschild family is like populating the whole earth because they just use sperm banks, like they just flood sperm banks, no pun intended. And they also, it's like this whole like controlling the world financial system conspiracy nonsense that like it's like another reason that like Ike just doesn't understand history. like like he can sit there and say he's not anti-Semitic, but then when he is like, "Oh, the Rothschild family and oh, the world banking system," do you know what I'm saying?
So he's
Like,
saying that they're polluting the race with their reptilian sperm,
yeah, I think that they're part of the whole thing.
and they're controlling the finances of the world, which is an anti-Semitic trope from the protocols and on.
Right. But it's like again, it's just so Ike loves to bash like history, like or not history. He loves to bash teachers and educators. He is like super against education, like public education. He thinks everyone should be homeschooled. It's very like he like clearly doesn't understand like one how researching history and first and secondhand sources like goes, and then also well, he doesn't understand how like the education system in America works clearly because teachers don't just get to pick what they want to teach about. There's plenty of people in America right now that are fighting to just have Black history classes in school. He paints this picture that just like I get it kind of, but like it's not. So then he like uses this to then say that all of history is fake and that we're being taught fake history and that but then he's
I mean, this is also a common
yeah.
feature of politics. I mean, the argument right now in this country is whether there's a conservative history or there's a liberal history, and the liberal history foregrounds things like slavery, I guess, in ways that a conservative history chooses not to. So these lenses are part of the culture wars in the U.S. So it's a point well taken, I guess, that education's not neutral, I guess. You know what I mean? It's biased.
Right. But it's not like he to sit there and be like, everything is fake history. It's like
it was a step too far, yeah. There was such a person as George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. They existed, they did things.
Right. Plus, if everything's fake history, then just take all your Gnostic shit out. Take all of the things, like literally take half of his book out because he can't use history and then also say we're being taught fake history. Because then what do you know about history then?
He gets
Why
caught
do you
in
know
paradoxes,
so much?
I see. Yeah.
Right. But then, so while we're talking about racism, because he literally I should have probably said this earlier to like start with it, but he literally because of this whole idea of like I was talking earlier about like society being founded on this idea of everything being physical and tangible and solid and touch and all that shit. That delusion comes from what like basically like the perceptions that are like projected of like politics, medicine, and like media, science, corporations, like everything, he basically says that that like lack of solidity, he literally, I would like to quote him here, says, makes that racism deal look a bit ridiculous, eh? He literally uses do you get what I'm getting at?
So what he's saying is that because the material world is an illusion, that we should ever get wound up over our skin color is ridiculous.
Yes, that is definitely part of it. Because it comes back into this the phantom self, the like self identity, it being the reason like we're all miserable. So like everything that you think makes up you and your identity, like that's what's wrong with you and everyone else around you. And like I just have like a really big issue with this because I to me when I was reading this, it just is like such a dangerous game because to me it's like, well, that just sounds like you're erasing culture. Like you're erasing like all these good things that are individual traits about different cultures and races and groups of people even. And it just creates this like weird lack of identity that I don't like. I get from his perspective why, but like on a greater picture, I don't understand what that adds to life. Do you get what I mean?
So it's a kind of like Maoist communist world where everything is evened out. Everybody wears the same outfit. We try to erase difference.
But then he doesn't, but then he's like, oh, but everyone's, working to be these cyborgs. We're all working to be less human because of the reptilians. So to me, those two things, they contradict each other.
We should be working to be less human, or we should be resisting the cyborgification of us.
Well, he's saying we should be resisting that, but that's where the world is going because of the reptilians. Like, that's their ultimate plan, is to connect us into the AI system, all that shit, which creates, like, we become less human. But to me, that contradicts, like, the way that we should fight that is to remain individual and to grab onto these things that we see as self-identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if we were all cyborgified, theoretically we become the same. But he's also saying we should try to be the same, or we should try to erase our ego, try to transcend the ego.
This is where I just see, to me, that contradicts. Maybe someone else could argue that it doesn't, but...
I understand. It does seem like they're basically speaking to the same thing, that if we did not do anything to transcend our ego, eventually the reptilians would just do it for us. So why would we bother?
Yeah, I guess that's where I kind of land a lot with Icke is, okay, I get it, but why? It's like kind of like where I kind of land with him a lot. But I literally have an entire slide here that's more problematic things about Icke if you want.
Let's just do the list. Go for it.
So here's a quote from an interview. Political correctness is simply a scam to get the target population to silence itself so that the cabal behind it doesn't have to.
So it's a conservative ideology that he's espousing.
Yeah, but he would also not like that, I think, if you
it sounds
gave
very
him any kind of label.
Though.
For sure, yeah. And it's going to get worse.
Okay, go ahead.
I think he says that about political correctness because he's mad that YouTube and Facebook banned him, but that's just me.
So this is a very recent statement.
Yeah, this interview, so I got a couple of things on this slide, or a couple of quotes and shit from an interview I found. I'll give you the link or whatever. It's not like it's on someone's like deep conspiracy blog.
Do you think that there's two different Ickes? Is there a 90s Icke and a 2020s Icke? Kathy O'Brien, I think, was a bit cooler in the 90s than she became after she discovered that Q was using so much of her stuff, and she sort of latched onto them. But before that, she was very neutral as far as politics are concerned.
So my book actually has like an addendum that he wrote. Like, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Did I just use that word?
It's pretty good
for me. Sorry. So he added basically, I guess. So I have to check and see what version, like what year the book that I have was published, but it must have been before. Oh, it must have been 2018. But Trump had just been going on about fake news because he added this whole thing about that. But so he definitely this isn't like 90s Icke. Like this is definitely, and even this interview he talked about like he got questioned about being basically like being in an anti-male culture, for a lack of a better word.
And he believes we are an anti-male culture.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that.
Okay, go ahead.
So here I'm going to touch on what I mentioned earlier as the transgender agenda. I just, I guess we should have put a trigger warning for everything, kind of low-key. I don't know what kind of warning, but just you might be triggered by anything.
Well, now we're getting into some specific triggering things, right?
Yeah, but this in particular, take this with a grain of salt, occult people. It's okay. Like, we don't believe this. You know that. We're all good. So the transgender agenda is, so I have a quote from him. Basically, the race is on to create a completely different human body, a synthetic version of the biological one, and this all locks into the AI agenda. So he basically he says that the young are being targeted by this. So he thinks that like in our culture, in our super liberal culture is what he says, that being transgender is being forced on the youth, essentially. I think he says this because like we're in such a more accepting society, I guess, and we're like it's okay to be transgender. I think he takes this as like it's being shoved on the youth, like by the reptilians to then do this, because that then takes the next step to what he says is a human that can't procreate naturally, is what he says, which we could argue also that so many things with that. But he basically says that it's a technologically produced human is what's going to be the next step. And then that's going to slowly become more and more of like a cyborg, not human, microchipped, plugged into the AI system, reptilian overlord's goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess I'll do a point for and a point against. In a way, his point is taken in that theoretically, you know, when we think about gender theory, it's not just your individual choice that's different, but in theory, I should rethink my own sexuality in light of the fact that all sexuality is a spectrum. So everyone's a little bit gay. Everyone's a little, there are no pure men or pure women. Gender, it's a spectrum. Everything's a spectrum. So,
well, he's not in agreement with you there.
but I mean, if he's saying that's wrong, then that's the theory that we're, quote unquote, foisting on the youth that is distorting their brains rather than liberating them. We tend to think of this as a liberating ideology, you and I, but you can simply flip the coin. And of course, I think you were alluding to this, but I'll say literally, transgender people can and do often have children. So
right, but I think he even sees that as not natural. Do you know? To me, there's also like, where's the line between natural and technological birth? Because to me, like you say, technological birth. To me, that doesn't even sound like artificial insemination. Like that's not, because that's still a birth. Do you know what I mean?
Just a
like
person at the end of the day who's perfectly natural in all ways. Yeah.
Right. So I guess it's a far-reaching goal, this AI system thing. But he thinks that the whole transgender agenda, quote unquote, is like that. Here's my problem too, is basically he in this interview, he goes on about how we're in an anti-white male, white straight male culture, essentially, which cry me a river, Ike. Also, he then, like, when it's convenient for him, I have it quoted as him saying, well, what is gender? Basically, when he was basically faced with, like, you're a white male. And then he goes, well, what's gender? Because to him, he's not pro non-binary. He doesn't get that. He's pro-binary. We're all gonna, I think he thinks binary is in, like, computers. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like
we're all ones and zeros.
Like, he wants us to be that, which then I'm like, what's that? That's a label, right?
It seemed to go against the transcendence of ego to try to fix on our gender, right?
Yeah, I see. This is where I then just I'm just floating, and I don't have anything to hold on to, Ike. I don't understand.
The via negativa, you're being liberated.
Right. He also, at one point in the same interview, literally defended toxic masculinity by saying that it's basically a fabricated thing, like the liberal fabricated idea, and that it doesn't exist, and that men should be that way because, quote, we don't want any more weak feminized males.
But that also would be essentializing their gender, which is against the ego transcendence, right?
Dude, I don't know. Like, this is where it's like, what the and then here again, he's totally anti-immigration, which also he's an old British white man. I love our British people, but like
they know.
And so he is anti-immigration because apparently this is going to eventually lead to like a one world, one government situation that then becomes like Ike's microchipped population, AI connection system theory. So he's anti-immigration because of that.
Well, the irony there would be, he takes so much inspiration from Blavatsky, whether or not he acknowledges it. Blavatsky saw that as the transcendence of the race, the merging of races, and America, she thought, was the great future of the world, right, because of our blending of of races, sexually and genetically and all that.
I don't know. That's like almost a little bit different, right? Than what.
Well, Blavatsky's
I mean,
on
maybe
board.
I know this.
She wants
Right.
that, so yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that makes what she's saying makes a lot more sense. But
Do we think, though, that maybe what Icke has done is identify who his audience is and started to play to them?
I've wondered that. See, I wonder who his audience is now. Because is he as big as he used to be? Like,
I don't think he makes headlines like he did during the turquoise period.
yeah, I mean, because like I said, like he's banned on shit. Well, he does have a podcast, though. I do know that.
Oh.
He has a podcast, but it's on his website because he plugged it in the interview I was reading.
I think
So,
you can
yeah.
sneak this kind of stuff past Google. They don't tend to, because it's tough to screen podcasts. I mean, we put out hours of content, right?
But yeah, I mean, Alex Jones has something that he has a platform of some kind, right?
Podcasts can be sneaky. Podcasts can be very sneaky. But you think the audience has shifted maybe? Or, I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking. There was a time maybe when he was a new age sort of character. I mean, maybe when you were getting into him where he was identified with maybe more lefty kind of people who are thinking outside the box, occulty kind of types. But now it feels like he's more alt-right. Q, in a way, has subsumed everything.
Yeah. And it's so weird because he won't label himself as anything as far as I can tell. And he's so anti-government, but then I don't know, maybe he's more of a libertarian than anything. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that technically Q is complex in that way because Q believes that certain government officials, Trump, for example, could clean up the government. So
to me, like, I think my like ultimate like where I landed, especially as I was just sitting last night, just like thinking about all this was because in my head, so Icke has like, he uses the idea of the reptilians and like the illusionary tactics to, make people think that they're, worshiping like God, for example, but they're really worshiping the demiurge and that, like these aliens implanting themselves and making us think that our reality is one thing when it's not. And that's how they have power. To me, Icke is the perfect freaking person to be one of the reptilians. Do you know what I mean? Like he is exactly what he describes because he was a famous sportscaster person before he was like all famous for conspiracies. He like came out with that shit because he had attention on him. He had people who liked him. He had fans. He had a platform. So what if he is just another one of the reptilians and he's just literally implanted himself to create chaos and frenzy and he's just another one of the psychic vampires.
I always feel that way about the Antichrist, people who say that there's an Antichrist who have a platform, someone like Johnny Todd, or through history, all sorts of folks have said, this person's the Antichrist. How do we know you're not the Antichrist? Because the Antichrist is meant to mislead us, right?
Right. So I'm just like, that's where I am, I guess, with that.
Well, if you're feeling comfortable, Olivia, bring us on home.
I hereby adjourn and declare closed this meeting, the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, till such time as we get together and do it again.
It's just us today, just the two of us.
Just
Rob.
the two. Can I always want to do that. God damn it.
I think you can do like 30 seconds before ASCAP comes after us.
Yeah, you're right.
I am Rob C. Thompson, the Supreme Hierophant of the Order of Alchemical Actors, and Olivia Litterall is our Grand Master.
It's been real.
We will catch you next time. Olivia will be here with a flipped episode, a little bit less personal tale of the ghost of Hammersmith.
I think it'll be more fun, or at least less high stakes.
We can lighten the mood. We can lighten the mood again. We like to balance.
Right.
All right. Catch us next time here on Occult Confessions.
Bye.